Hello and welcome to Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers by writers
to keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Billy.
I'm Gabe.
I'm Marie.
And I'm Will.
All right, people, we are here to do, we're doing a thing. Will had this idea. We're doing a book club around Six of Crows. So I'm going to hand it over to the moderator himself, old Will Ralston here. And I'm excited. I love this book. So what do you got in store for us, buddy? Let's do it.
So this is going to be part 1 of 2 of our discussion of Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows. And the reason I really wanted to do this book was because for my writing group, the Immortals, I wanted all of us to discuss it as a writing group because my space opera heist novel really was inspired because of Six of Crows. And so I figured what a great way that we could all read about it and discuss it. And I pulled in 2 of the Immortals on our episode, which is Billy and Gabe. And I also asked Marie to come in and discuss it. You know, I figured she would have some great opinions. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to our guests to talk about themselves. And I am first going to go with Marie.
Well, thank you, Will. And thanks for the invitation to be here. Yeah, so my name is Marie. I live in New Mexico. I write speculative fiction, mostly fantasy. Let's be real. Oh, let's be unreal, actually. And I'm actually currently working on a fantasy heist also. So this book has been at the top of my list to read. So thanks for giving me the excuse to do it. But yeah, and my debut is actually co-written and comes out this year, 2022. My co-author's named Jessi Honard, and the book is called Unrelenting. And I'm very thrilled that it's going to be coming out this year.
Amazing. Marie, do you and Jessi have a date of when it's coming out?
Spring 2022. So we don't know yet, but if anyone's interested in getting updates, you can head to thegregorybooks.com and sign up for our email list, not to give you all a call to action right away. But
no, because we're going to put that in the show notes. So please tell us the things.
Yeah. I'm unashamed.
No, do it. And also, too, is maybe by the time this episode airs, that we will actually have a pre-order link as well. So everyone, while we might not have a pre-order link right away on as we're talking, maybe by the time the show does come out, please look at the show notes. Please pre-order. Okay, because it makes a really big difference. And Marie and Jessi are our friends, and we are so excited about their book coming up. And later down the line, they both are going to be on the show to discuss their book, which we're super excited about.
Can't wait.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to turn it to Billy, who is part of my writing group called the Immortals. And Billy, why don't you tell everyone what you are writing and what type of genres you write in?
Hello, everyone. I'm Billy Palmer. I'm a part of the Immortals with Will. I write sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. And sometimes I combine them all. Let's see, what am I writing right now? I'm writing a story, a fiction story about scribes who carve the teeth of giants to direct their power, and a steampunk fantasy called Dragon Gear, and it's as like dragony and mech as it sounds. So that's it.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And Billy is also, I can speak to this because I read his work often, is really a diverse writer. And if you ever get to see him, say maybe if he goes to the Writing Excuses cruise this year, just hand him some teeth. Maybe if you find some shark teeth on the beach, just hand him some teeth.
There's a lot of teeth in my fiction, if you can't tell. There's just teeth carving and dragon teeth, and it's everywhere.
So be on the lookout for teeth, okay? Got it.
If you want to play him that Lady Gaga song from the Fame Monster, Teeth, he'll appreciate it. He'll break into a dance. It's great. Next, we will lead it off to Gabe. It's all yours. Tell us about what you love to write and what you're working on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriel of Salmeron. I write fantasy. I've been working on the same story for the past 6 years. It has all the elements in the periodic table. It has dogs, because I have 7 dogs. That's a thing you should know about me. Okay.
A lot of dogs.
So there's going to be dogs. The dog never dies as well. That's another thing to note about my writing. And I'm also a blacksmith, a chemical engineer, and all those things also appear in my story. There's a lot of thermodynamics and sciencey cool stuff in a fantasy setting. So yeah, that's basically it.
I'm going to
guys are
pitch
awesome.
this for everyone. I'm going to pitch this book for everyone.
Thank
Gabe's
you.
book that he's currently working on is Avatar: The Last Airbender meets the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. But it's cooler and it's still being built. But what we've all gotten a chance to read at the Immortals has blown us away. And each time he submits part of his novel, we're like, could you write a little bit quicker? Because we would like to read it a little bit more. Okay. Like, don't be throwing us a Pat Rothfuss on us, okay? Where it's going to take you years to get to book 2 or 3. Just letting you know, Gabe.
Thank you. He's my
It's
personal
excellent.
pitcher.
Yes.
That's excellent. Yeah.
That kind of sounds sexual.
I need one of those. Personal picture.
No,
I don't care if it's
that
sexual or
also-
not. Shoot.
Okay. Yeah. Why not? That's how we roll in this show. All right. So I am going to take volunteers for the first question. How would you describe Six of Crows to someone who's never heard of it?
I actually pitched this to some of my students not too long ago because it's in the library at the school I work at. And I basically told them it's a badass fantasy heist with amazing, compelling characters. And if you haven't read it, I'm not sure why you haven't. That's not helpful, but that's how I pitched it.
Okay. Nick, how would you pitch it?
So, space heist with magic. That's kind of how I pitch it to people. And kind of get into depth about some. I like Inej a lot. So, I like to talk about Inej and how great she is. But
we'll get to the
there later.
characters. Yeah, we will. Does anyone have any like little one-liners or how they would describe it to people? Marie.
I mean, I would say all the things that especially Marshall was just saying, but also it's just impeccably plotted. Like if you're looking for the Plato's perfect form of a heist, it's a really good model to follow.
Gabe.
So yeah, I would jump off what Marie said in the sense that it's perfectly plotted in a way that everything is earned, and everything, even if it's surprising, you're not like, yeah, I don't see that happening. Like it's the writing adage of it's surprising yet inevitable. Like you can see it coming from a mile away or you cannot, but it's going to surprise you either way. I think that's an amazing thing of this book.
100%. Billy.
I would also add that the characters are so just like amazing and distinct, and each of them has just a completely developed voice. And I love that about it, that every time it's like I didn't necessarily even need the chapter headings to know who I was reading, whose head I was living in at the time.
So how I like to describe this, so Six of Crows is technically the 4th book in Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse universe that she's created. The first 3 was based on the popular show. Well, the show is based on the popular novel Shadow and Bone. Shadow and Bone was the first book in the first trilogy. And how I describe Six of Crows, and I usually give this as an intro into the Grishaverse, I describe it as you're meeting like the a group of thieves, the X-Men, in a Russian-inspired universe. Because what Leigh does is she really takes a lot of Russian folklore to create the Grisha and the Second Army. But what's interesting is that she's populated these worlds with these really unique cultures that are inspired by real life. And she does it authentically without appropriating our current type of cultures here in the US or around the world, really. So Marshall, you had your hand up. What were you going to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on what Billy said too, about the distinct characters and their voices. Also, the author does a phenomenal job, and I might have missed this because my family just walked by and asked me something. But I think there's, I think Gabe said this. There's nothing wasted in that. No little detail is wasted. So, like, I know we're not talking about characters yet, but for example, the gloves that Kaz has, right? It's throughout, but like, it's subtle. There's subtleties in every character, but everything interconnects with every other character, and there's nothing wasted within that. And I think to be able to write like that from a craft perspective is something to admire with Bardugo's work for sure.
So, I've heard a lot of Leigh actually talk about the construction of Six of Crows. And I think for anyone who's read it, everything that you're hearing come off of us is that it was masterfully plotted. But at the same time, it's very character driven. You really get a sense of each of the characters' voices. And if anyone has ever listened to Sarah Ennie's First Drift podcast, I will put it in the show notes of what episode it is. But Leigh talks about that this was one of the hardest books she ever wrote. And in fact, she needed to take a break from writing it for a minute. And that's when she wrote her first adult novel, Ninth House. So I want to talk about first, let's just think of it, and I ask those questions about pitching because I think as writers, when we're thinking of our own work, if we can pitch another author's work, it can help us better formulate of how we would talk about our own book. Maybe not so much in a query letter because we're going to use comparables that are current, but it also just as when we're talking about our own work to our peers or when our books come out to, anyone who loves to read. I think this is a really great way for all of us to get into the habit of pitching, any type of book. But first, I just want to I want us to come from a perspective before writers, just as fans and as a reader. And so, Maria, I want to ask you first, just as a reader of science fiction and fantasy, what did you think of it? What were you left with when you finished the whole book?
I was torn because I couldn't decide if I wanted to go read book 2 or go back and read this again because I loved it so much. Yeah, it's just really great world, great characters, and the pacing, and definitely that satisfaction of what Gabe was talking about everything just clicking so beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's just a really testimony of Leigh's amazing crafting of a story. I think when I think of her, I think of someone who is a real storyteller. She's the person that I think of when you think about gathering around a fire or gathering around someone's living room and listening to them talk. And again, I've seen Leigh talk at signings about 4 times. And each time she is so captivating and gracious and also real. She talks about the real struggles of sometimes of writing. So Gabe, what were your thoughts after you finished the book? Just as a reader of science fiction and fantasy.
Mm-hmm. I think it had been a while since I had been so hooked with the characters. Because not that I don't care, obviously I do. What happens afterwards to, in the plot itself, I just want to see the next part of the character's arc, from all of them. Even the ones that you would say are more secondary in the group, I want to see everything that happens to them. And I'm super hooked. I've been thinking about so much about relationships, about the gray areas of each character and how that's played out, and everyone and how they're gonna turn out. That's what I'm super hooked in that part.
Awesome. And Marshall, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I really like that you said, I mean, obviously this is a very character-driven story. But what I think Leigh Bardugo does so freaking well on almost a subtle level. I mean, we've been talking a lot about setting in our master's program right now, and that city, Ketterdam, is just insanely well realized, and the inner workings, and for me as a Star Wars fan, I've always been insanely intrigued by like the underworld, right? And like this city for me is like, holy shit, it's all underworld, it's all intrigue, and it's fun. And I wanna know who's making plays for power, what's going on. So like, yes, that's still character driven on some level, but the city itself is a character for sure. And I think we'd be remiss not to mention that for sure.
For sure. And Billy, talk to me about your experience of reading it. I mean, I know me and Billy have especially texted back and forth about this book, and just our experiences. So tell me what did it leave you with as just a reader, just as like, reading science fiction and fantasy?
It like kind of like Gabe said, it's been a while since I've been so hooked not only by characters but by the world. And I read Six of Crows. That was my first introduction to the Grishaverse, and then I bought Shadow and Bone. I was just at Books A Million today. I was trying to find a paper copy of Six of Crows, but couldn't. And then I bought Ninth House instead because I could find it. I'm just like instantly hooked to whatever Leigh Bardugo writes, and so it was like, I don't know, that it's hard to express in words, but that feeling of finally, okay, a world I can spend some time in. It's been a long time since I've just really wanted to hang out in the world. I just finished, the Jade trilogy and was feeling slightly sad. So I'm happy to be in this world.
Thinking about we keep talking about the structure and how the plot was and the heist itself. So let's talk about plot beats for a minute. And I want to take anyone volunteers who feel strongly. Was there anything that you looked at through the view of a 3-act structure or 7 plot point structure that you felt really called to you? Like when you were looking at the story as through a writer's eyes, that you thought about, this was ingenious of, how this was structured. Gabe.
It clicked more with a 7-point plot structure. But what I would like to point out is that I did like I felt it while I was reading, but just a quick like page count. And around like parts 5 and 6, it's divided into 6 parts. And by parts 5 and 6, it goes down in page number. Like you have chapters that are around 18 pages, 20 pages in the previous parts. And in part 5, you have 7 pages average with a maximum of 10 pages and a minimum of 4. And with the next part, where it's still rising action in part 6, you get an average. I think it's around 8, with a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 8 pages. And you can feel how that moves the story.
So talk to me at what point in the book that you feel like it was just moving at lightning pace.
I think it was around. I put it down here. I'm not remembering. I don't have that kind of memory. It's around chapter 27 that you can feel the rising action, that you can start to feel all the things that have been set up, that they're now starting to move. Like there's no stopping what's going to happen now.
So I'm just going to read a section from chapter 27, and this is the opening of it, and it's called From Jesper's Point of View. Where the hell is Kaz? Jesper bounced from foot to foot in front of the incinerator, the dim clang of alarm bells filling his ears, rattling his thoughts. Yellow protocol? Red protocol? He couldn't remember which was which. Their whole plan had been built around nearing the sound of an alarm. Their whole plan had never been built around hearing the sound of an alarm. So I think just that opening chapter of chapter 27, and it's part 5, The Ice Does Not Forgive, when they're in
the Ice Palace.
The Ice Palace. This is when things really do move at a lightning pace. And just for everyone who's listening, that, we're in chapter 27, and it actually, as far as chapter goes, it goes up to chapter 46, right? So I want you to just think about that. We're in chapter 27. We're on page 321 of the paperback, okay? And we have to go get to 463 is the last page. That's more than 100 pages, but those 100 pages move at such a quick pace. And when you're thinking of story, you would think that would be dragging, right? And also, a lot of times when we talk about young adult literature, sometimes people will look down on it, right? But some of the best stories in the last 20 years has been young adult. Because this is a book that any adult, I have rarely seen an adult author build tension and create a complex story as well as Leigh does for this book. So, Marie, I saw that you, did you want to add anything? I felt like you wanted to say something.
Nick had his hand up too.
Yeah, I think it was Nick.
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
No, Gabe actually said it all. I actually view this as a 7-point plot structure and really related it to that. I mean, it is broken up into 6 different parts for the book. So if you have the paperback, you can see that there. But yeah, no, just adding on to what Gabe said. He said it all for me.
Great. Go ahead, Marie.
Yeah, I actually had a lot easier time plotting it on a 3-act structure than I did 7-point, because I found myself on 7-point just going down the rabbit hole of like, well, this is Kaz's 7-point plot structure, and this is Nina's 7-point plot structure. And they all, I mean, it's a testament to how strong the characters are, but because you're looking at, well, what's the protagonist's goal? And the protagonist is the crew at large, right? But each one of them is so strong that they each have their own arc that is so compelling and lines up really nicely on top of the plot beats.
So talk to me about the 3-act structure for a minute. Can you give us some pointers of what really spoke to you? Like some specific points when you were looking at the 3-act structure? What made you like go towards that structure for the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just said, okay, chapter 1 is a prologue, and I set it aside. It's important because it speeds up the scene where we commit to the heist, where Kaz is having his meeting with Van Eck initially. But if you just kind of punt that out the window, that first chapter, from there forward, it does fit the 3-act structure really nicely. You sort of lay the scene with like the brawls between these different gangs and life is rough. But here's maybe a way out. And then we've got this spiraling, no turning back now as they're trying to get onto the ship. There's really no space for them in Ketterdam unless they come back victorious. And so it does a really nice job of whatever you think that plot point ought to be and whatever you think it ought to be doing. Whether it's making the decision, no turning back, oh no, things are horrible. Oh no, things are horrible. Or like they're doing all those things.
100%. Marshall, you had something to add?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I can see the 7-point plot structure for sure. But when I'm plotting books or thinking about a book and I'm going to use multiple POVs, it's very daunting to think about 7-point in a character driven story, because you have to, like Marie said, you have to outline it by character pretty much, because everybody has their own little mini arcs in this book. Right. And in the series. So, it's easier for my brain to think about the 3-act plot structure. And again, when you get to that heist point, I mean, that's that 3rd act. That's like shit's going to hit the fan and it's either going to go or it's not. And that's easier for me to think about. And then breaking up within that, the individual arcs of the characters, I think is a easier way for my brain to think about it. Because otherwise I'm bogged down and like, wait, but Jesper is doing this right now. And, Inez is doing this right now. And it just gets like kind of crazy. So that's what I was saying.
So I also want to add the first chapter actually opens up with a character who we don't see after this, Juiced. And I want to just lead in with the first line of the first chapter. Juiced had 2 problems, the moon and his mustache. I felt like that was such an interesting way to be like, okay, One, what's going on with the moon, and what is his mustache all about? And then when we start reading it, he was supposed to be making his rounds at the Hode house. But in the last 15 minutes, he'd been hovering around the southeast wall of the gardens, trying to think of something clever and romantic to say to Anya. And I figured, wow, this is such a great way to get into a character's head. And also, it's so fundamental when you like someone and you're thinking of all these different things about them. But what I also thought about when I read the first chapter is this the first chapter of someone who wrote their first novel? And I thought about it as from being, a early career writer. And I think this wouldn't have worked under someone who wasn't as deft as Kraft, but also someone who didn't already have this existing world. That's what makes the first chapter work so well, is that even if you didn't read the first 3 books, I still feel like you're getting a sense of this big world, within that first chapter. Now, go ahead, Marshall.
Well, I read him in that order. I remember you had recommended Six of Crows to me at some point, and I was like, oh, I'll read that. And I turned my wife onto it, and I read the sequel. And then I went back and read the Shadow and Bone trilogy. So, but yeah, there wasn't a point, like I said earlier, with Six of Crows, I got the sense of this huge world that like, I just want to hang out in. Right. But she did a good job, whether you had read that first trilogy or not. You didn't need to, because the way that she outlined and laid out Six of Crows, for sure. So I just wanted to throw that, because I think Gabe mentioned something about that earlier too. So
100%. So, in this, like the structure and the plot points, all of us have mentioned the characters as well as the overreaching plot. So now I want to have a little fun, and I want to just go around and tell me who either was your favorite character or who you identified with the most, or both, because they can be 2 different ones of who you identify with, but who was your favorite. And I'm going to take volunteers with this one. Who would like to start off first? Okay, Billy, go for it.
So this one's really difficult for me, because I think that I loved the characters so much, like every one of them, even Wylan after a while. And so I think I love Jesper, but people have told me that I'm Kaz Brecker, which I'm like, I don't know how I take that. He's super compelling. He's like such a compelling character, and I'm a little self-conscious about being related to him. So, or people relating him to me. Yeah.
I love it. And Gabe, what about you? Do you want to go next?
Oh, I was nodding along to Billy, but I can go next. And counterpoint to what Billy said, Wylan, I would say, is my favorite character. Because the others, I would say the others are kind of obvious in being amazing and being like the center of the team. But Wylan, how he starts to unwind, and how we see, like, that's the character that I would love the most to see more of. And how he's super brave with these people in a world that he had never been, like, even dipped his toes in. And I think his development was amazing. And I was just, not that I was hooked at the beginning with him, but by the end I was like, yeah, I need to see more of Wylan. I need to see more of this guy. I loved him so much.
You have to read Crooked Kingdom then.
yeah.
Just no spoilers, but throwing that out there.
I have to say this about the Wylan. It's interesting that you picked that, which is also very logical. Wylan is actually the reader who's never been seen through these characters. So we have a character that literally is having fresh eyes for everyone, where everyone has these little already connections. Kaz and Inej, Nina and Matthias, like they already have these structures built, and Jesper is interconnected with all of them, except for Matthias, we'll say it first, but he's already has a rapport with Kaz, has a rapport with Inej. And here comes Wylan, who's just like, and what's interesting about Wylan also is that people think they know his story because he was this rich boy who maybe his father didn't like, but they don't really know his story yet. And I think as you start to see Wyland's growth, you start to understand the character a lot more, and you actually start to see his actual strength, which isn't brute strength. So, Marie, talk to me. Who did you identify with, or who was your favorite?
I love Jesper just because I love the witty repartee. That's always one of my things. And of course, he's using it as a defense mechanism, so that's all the more endearing. I also love Wyland. I was so sad that we never got a POV chapter for him, which I realized today and kind of flipping back through the book. But I'd say the character that I maybe personally identify the most with would be Inej. She's kind of going through a redefinition of self and trying to decide which path her life should take. And I've been going through personal changes as well. So I think going through this time, that was the character who spoke to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Inej is just a really complex, soulful character. Gabe, you had a comment?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I identify with Jesper in the sense that I think I noted 7 things that he has ADHD. So, and I felt that thing of just wanting to be in motion all the time. And as Marie said, he is with that, that banter he uses, he's avoiding stuff. Just going, if there's something important gonna happen, he's gonna say something and get distracted and go to the next thing. So, and I think I can identify with that.
On that point, so in talking with Billy and Gabe about the book, I already told them who I thought they were. And I totally thought Billy was Kaz and Gabe was Jesper, hands down. I was like, those are the 2 that I see you as. And just for side funny note, Billy says to me, you really think I'm Kaz? You think I have that much darkness in me? And I was like, oh, no. You're just that badass. Okay, that's why. And the reason I thought of Jesper was a lot for the reasons that Gabe said, but also the way Jesper is with guns. This is going to make Gabe sound creepy, but it's not. Is the way Gabe is with knives, because Gabe, makes knives, and he makes really beautiful knives. He's going to start a business. So I just kept thinking, just the jovialness that I think Jesper has reminds me of Gabe. So. Marshall or Nick, did you want to add in of who you identified with or as your favorites?
I'm gonna go after Nick because Nick was gonna volunteer to go first, so I'm gonna go after him. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going with Jesper as my favorite. Just really I identified with him a lot too. There, and he's a gun guy. I like guns too. And just I don't know, it's very. His whole demeanor just made things feel like it was going to be all right until it wasn't going to be all right. Then, so I really liked him as a character. I loved him and wanted kind of more of him throughout the series. But, Will, I'm going to actually open this one up to you and ask you, do you feel like I most like?
Who?
Because I don't have
I was
an
going to
answer.
ask him the same thing when I was done because he didn't give us characters. And
Oh.
I was going to say who my characters were, and then I was going to throw it back. So,
I do.
Nick, you're jumping the gun.
I kind of have an answer for this. But
I have an answer for you, Nick. I personally think you're Wyland.
Ooh, that's good.
I do, because Wyland will come across one way, and sometimes Wyland doesn't know how brilliant he really is. And there's also a slight deep hurt that's in him, but he's also very observant and he's very mindful of people's feelings. And I feel like that is like you. I feel like you're an empathic a lot of times, and you don't. I think you realize it sometimes, but I think you are definitely Wyland.
Okay,
I agree with that. I like that.
And you went a different route with that answer, and I appreciate it and love you.
Mm-hmm. Anytime. Marshall, you had something to say.
Yeah, so I'm with the Jesper crowd mostly because I love that character for the same reason I love Han Solo. And I'm rewatching all the Star Wars movies with my family right now. And to me, the gunslinger, witty sarcasm, like for me, like that's kind of how I kind of move through the world a little bit. But at the same time, I'm a little bit, I'm more identify with Inej a lot, mostly because of I think Marie said this too, like the searching and there's a purpose behind what she does. I love an assassin. And don't get me wrong. No matter what, I'm going to love the assassin character more than anybody else, which is why Jesper I love, but Inej I identify with. But because there's a darkness and there's always a purpose within that darkness. And I got that from Inej, right? And she's a weapon, right? Which is what most assassins are. You can point them in a direction, but Inej, there's a couple scenes. I think it was the silo scene more than anything. It was just like, there's something, there's still a questioning there. Like there's still more than just point and shoot with that particular weapon. And there's a reason Kaz loves her as well. And so that character, that relationship between her and Kaz really spoke to me. But Jesper was just fun as hell. So I love that. I love it. So that's my answer. And now at some point, Will, you'll tell me what character you think I am, or I'm going to feel left out and I'm going to cry.
Yes, I will. Just give me a minute. Marie, what did you want to add?
No, I just want to jump on the Inej love a little bit more. That it's so fascinating to me that she's literally made a career out of being small and silent and not noticed, and there's a moment where, she's like, I'm dangerous, and she kind of like rolls that word around in her mouth and thinks about it, and it feels good, but a little scary. And I think that was just really cool to see that like that part of her could actually be part of her strength, not just the part of her that got beaten down and honestly severely traumatized. And I think she's been through just as much as any of them. She's been a true victim and now she's a true survivor. But I do want to hear what Will has to say about Marshall.
Well, but the attachment to the Saints too, I thought was really interesting for Inej's character. And I think that was, again, like, and I like that you said, like, she makes a career out of being small. An assassin can't be noticed. She's a wraith, right? She's invisible. But at the same time, there's a devotion underneath that, right? To the Saints, to the naming of the weapons, to like there's a methodical part to her weaponry. And I think it's beautiful the way Bardugo laid it out. So I'm with you. I love that character.
Yeah. It feels like survival mechanism to me, because
absolutely.
How else could she get through what she'd gone through previously?
100%. Yeah. Inej is I think a fascinating character. Billy, go ahead. What did you want to say?
Just listening to everybody talk about their favorite characters and just kind of their characteristics and stuff. I just realized that I think Leigh does a really great job of like foiling each character with another character that like just really enhances their personalities in a lot of ways. And I was just thinking of trying to kind of match them up and thinking of Kaz and Inej and how Kaz is just like, I have no saints, I have no gods, and Inej is like, I have the saints. And just thinking of Jesper and Wylan and Matthias and Nina and how they all just kind of like highlight each other's characteristics by being opposite in a lot of ways. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, and also needing each other too, right? And like the idea that, those foils are also kind of like a Batman Joker kind of thing, right? Like they're opposite, but they need each other, and they grow because they're together.
So for me, I would say the two characters I identify or that I love the most is Nina and Inej. And I think Inej for very apparent reasons, if anyone knows me. Because just of my upbringing and like having to learn to survive and to be super young and I moved to New York City when I was just about to turn 18. I've never been here before. And I didn't really have a choice. I needed to leave home and I needed to be on my own. And I think looking back, at the time when you're in it, you don't think anything of it. You're just like, well, I had to. But now, as I'm a lot older, I look back and I really look at like, wow, I was really resourceful. I really did really well for myself because almost everyone that I knew now who's around that age of like 18 to 24 or, a little older couldn't even manipulate the city or move around this New York City the way I did. So I really identified with Inej in that way. For me, to me, Nina is actually the heart of the whole group. She is a lover. She is also a fierce protector. And she also doesn't make things black and white, which therefore, Marshall, you remind me very much of Nina. Because she is a caretaker, but she's a warrior, and she understands about loyalty, and she understands about the complexities of life. I think in a lot of ways, Nina is she has a global perspective, but she also understands what it's like to look at that perspective in individuality with the people that she meets. I think she sees things where other people don't see things. And I think this is why you kind of see Nina and Inej in the first book really start to develop this fondness of each other, and I thought that was a really interesting because I think sometimes how other women, are written, right, in stories, how many times do we really see a story with science fiction or fantasy where these women are complex, but they're friends. There's no competition, like they really have their back. And I felt like, that is definitely good things for anyone who is not identifying as a woman to notice that Leigh does with those characters, because I think it would be very easy if you are a male to write women at odds with each other, within a group dynamic, and I think that's one of the most special things that all of them have different levels of relationships with them. Go ahead, Gabe.
I was thinking, and this adds to what I was thinking as well. Talking back to what Marshall said about the foils, about the characters being foils. What I love and what's so brilliant about what Leigh did is that it's not linear. Like there's like the obvious foils, Matthias and Nina, and like the couplings and Kaz and Inej. But you also have, for example, Matthias for Kaz, because Matthias has the perfect, like the moral compass, even if he is twisted in how he grew up, but he has the decency, as Kaz tells him, and he also is learning to be a bit dirty from Kaz. And you also get Nina with Jesper regarding like being a Grisha. So there's no one like that. One just has one foil. Like every character has one foil. Everyone is jumping off each other. And I think that's super hard to pull off. And it's brilliantly done. And it gives so much character in every single scene.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Billy.
It gives so much tension in every single scene as well. And I think that's what she does really well, is like in the moment comparisons in a lot of ways, conversationally, but then also just her description of them. She does a great job with that.
So I just want to know, like, Marshall, Nick, who do you think I am?
Shit.
Should I take the bullet on this one?
Go ahead. I think I have an idea.
No, Nina. I have to go with Nina on this one. Yeah.
Why do you think Nina?
Because you can see through the bullshit. And that's exactly what Nina does with Matthias. She really sees him for him, not for what he's basically been bred to do, to what he's been conditioned. And Matthias is a really interesting character. I'm surprised we haven't talked about him yet. But I would, for you, Will, I'm going with Nina, mainly for the fact that you live through the world at your own pace, and you see through everyone's disguises.
And you take no shit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, because Nina doesn't put up with nothing, and I love that about her. and if there's anything I picked up from you, Will, is you don't put up with some shit. So that's what I appreciate about you. You know, you'll put it on Front Street, and you're like, you know what? Fuck you. If I need to say that, you know. So and that's what I love about you. So I'm with Nick. I mean, and I'll be honest. There's some the planning side of you, I would say, and the need to kind of make sure things are going to happen in a way is a very Kaz-ish part of you, but I'd say it's outweighed with the Nina aspect for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I love all of these. Go ahead, Marie.
I mean, it was interesting that, you know, before we got on here, you were like, I've got a plan, don't worry. That's a very Kaz thing. But
yeah,
when Nick said Nina, you sounded surprised. So I'm curious who you would have picked for yourself. Well,
I mean, I definitely feel super connected to Inej. I think we are a lot of like. I think growing up, the way that the things that I did and got in trouble with as a child, as a teenager, is very Inej. I didn't kill anyone. Everyone, it wasn't that. It was just I was a little bit, you know, I was rough. Okay.
Quick disclaimer.
Exactly. Yeah. Didn't kill anyone. Didn't hurt anyone. I understand Inej's not to be seen, to be overlooked, and then ultimately to use that as a weapon, you know. Billy, were you going to say something? I thought you said.
I was actually going to say something to the effect of a combination, you know, like maybe you're a recovering Inej, but I think that you've, you know, blossomed into a Nina. And because you're gregarious, you're social, you're charming. And I think that, and you do draw people together. And you also encourage, you know, like mental flexibility. I think that like Matthias is really rigid. A lot of people are really rigid, and Nina is always encouraging them to look at the world in a different way. And I think that you certainly do that for a lot of people.
Oh, thanks, everyone. You know, I think what's interesting is we start to see, and we're not talking about this book on these episodes, we see a lot more growth of Matthias in Crooked Kingdom and Wylan. They really blossom in different ways, and the other crows deepen in a lot of different ways. So I want to end this episode with, I want you to, I wrote this down in our questions, and even if you didn't get to like jot things down, I think all of us has brought up some really interesting points about each character. So take 2 of the crows and make a character diagram. In the diagram, list their attributes and flaws. So I'm going to go first. And I'm going to pick Inej. Inej is your thief, your wraith, your assassin. She's skilled with knives. She's skilled with climbing walls. She has also had to endure being a prostitute. She also was stolen from her family. She is also in the Grishaverse a Shu who are looked down upon as less than. Her skin is looked down upon as less than. These are all things that inform her, affect her, and are damaged parts of her. I thought what I looked at as a writer reading this is that Leigh didn't make anyone who was perfect. No one was super strong, super smart, they all had these attributes, but then they also had these flaws, and those flaws affected their sometimes judgment or sometimes their reactions to things. Let's look at Matthias's racism. We'll call it racism because he is definitely racist or hateful towards Grisha, right? And it totally affects his judgment until he actually starts to get to know Nina. So with that in mind, is there one character that anyone would like to talk about, their attributes and then their flaws? Marshall.
I'm gonna grab Jesper just on because something you just said jumped out at me. I'm gonna take his addiction and his gambling and his compulsiveness as a flaw, and that puts, I don't know, when you know somebody that struggles with these things, that puts other people in peril, right? And if you're part of a collective group, those little decisions, at some point Jesper makes the wrong decision and he loses something, and it's just not, and that affects more than just him, right? So that spoke to me quite a bit. But he's obviously an asset when he's not beholden to those addictions and those compulsions. And I think it's the group that pulls him away from those things when he needs it. Right. So yeah, that's my response to that.
I love it. Anyone have any other? Gabe. Well, Gabe and then Marie.
So I'm thinking about Wylan, and that his attributes are kind of obvious once we get to see them. He has a beautiful mind. He has so many abilities that none of them have. Everyone, they make fun of how what Wylan is doing, no one else could do. So I think that's amazing. And I'm trying to think about his flaws, and I can only think of his how insecure he is with a group becomes being reckless to prove himself. He doesn't particularly fail, but there's a couple of instances where if things went a little bit wrong, things would have been very wrong from the things he did. So I would like to ask the group, what else would you think about Wylan as a flaw?
Yeah, outside of his need to prove himself, I think that's a massive flaw for him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that drives everything. That anytime he screws up, it's usually around that. I can't think of anything else. Billy?
I'd say he's pretty naive.
Oh yeah.
He in the way that in the barrel, he's thinking the best of people still, or hoping for the best of people still. So I think that's naive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
I would say with Wylan, it's his dyslexia. His dyslexia, and I don't mean that I'm dyslexic, is a flaw. What I mean is that it does not make them this perfect superhuman character, this perfect person who can build things. His dyslexia holds him back because he has always been taught that he was dumb or stupid, and it affects his emotional well-being. And when it turns out he is brilliant and smart, and he has a lot to give. And I think by how many kids, young adults who read this, who are going through something at their time of their life, who struggle with a learning disability or reading, and could have read this or listened to it on audio, and really identify. You know what I mean? I think all of us can identify even with a struggle that we've had, and in turn it makes us want to try to prove something to ourselves. Marie, what did you have?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about Kaz. He's obviously meticulous. He has a plan and then 17 plans under that in case things don't go well. Obviously intelligent. I mean, he's planning to the point of being prescient. It's he knows what's going to happen. But flaws, I think, that really come up for him. He's slow to trust, can't let his guard down. Maybe it's almost impossible for him to trust. He's vengeful and he's wrathful. And I suspect one of the only reasons he has such a loyal crew is because things work out for the most part. If they didn't, I think he'd be an extremely difficult person to be around.
I agree. Yeah. Go ahead, Billy.
I was going to talk about Kaz too, and I agree with everything that Marie said, and I would throw in that he's tough as well. Like he just keeps standing back up over and over. He understands people on a really, really deep level, and he has that poisonous resentment. He's jaded. He's self-centered, and I think that a big arc for him is that he believes love and trust are liabilities, and make him weak. And so I think that's a big flaw for him that needs to be sort of rectified in the end.
Marshall or Nick, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just around Kaz. I mean, there's a level of trauma and there's a level of I would say OCD with that character as well that makes it. And I think that goes to what Marie was saying as far as the planning aspect of it. It's like there's no way Kaz cannot have all those plans. Like he can't be like, all right, I got one plan. Let's see how it goes. It's like he has to have 15 plans within plans and contingencies for those plans, right? But then I always come back to the touch and the cane. Like those two things to me, like, you know, I don't want to say like the cane isn't necessarily like like a safety net or like, and then there's like this ability to aversion to touching people's skin. I know folks like this, and I think that's really interesting to have that on top of this meticulous planning, on top of the trauma. And I think, it makes, this is why I think I love this book so much, is that none of these characters are a Superman. All of these characters are heavily flawed and they need each other. But they have to figure it out on their own as well, right? They come to these conclusions and break through some of these barriers because of the people around them. And I think it's really, I don't know. Kaz is really a really, really compelling character. And I think what you guys said as far as that, I don't think like I said, he cannot do what he does. And I think that's really interesting to have that be the leader of a group. So
That's a really excellent point. Nick.
So Matthias, right? I want to disagree with something you said, Will. Don't kill me for it. You said he was racist, right? Against the Grisha.
Yeah.
But I think coming out and saying that we're eliminating what Nina did to him previously. And and as it's described, like she was very treacherous.
You mean saved him?
I mean, she
saved him.
That's one way to look at it. That's perspective, right?
No, she totally 100% saved his life.
I mean, but he doesn't see it that way. He doesn't. That's not something that is apparent for him right away.
Nick,
and everyone's video froze, so I can't see your reaction. Will,
are you talking about when she like sells him out essentially as a slaver? Okay.
Yeah. And from that point, he's very, very jaded. Okay, let's hear it.
I'm gonna disagree with you there because Matthias was already brought up and conditioned and indoctrinated in this culture that Grisha were evil, and he had Inferni burn down and kill his sister, his mother. So that reinforced this hatred, and he said something to Nina. Okay, early on, where she says, I'm going to paraphrase this, where she says something to the effect of, you hate us because, we have gifts. And he goes, well, he says something to the effect, well, you're unnatural. The Grisha is unnatural. It goes against everything that nature is. And Nina is basically saying, is that what you think I am? You think I'm unnatural and I shouldn't exist? And his response was, well, maybe you shouldn't. This is before she actually had to turn him in, which, by the way, saved his motherfucking life. Okay?
Well, and
I'm just saying
and,
it.
and
I'm just
you're
calling
right.
it out.
Well, you're right. I mean, that thought process right there is the racism I think that that Will is pointing out, Nick. I mean, and I totally get the idea. He's coming from this. He is indoctrinated. He is brainwashed. He's part of this culture of hatred, right? And I think Nina's what pulls him out of it. And I think that's what I think is important to understand, that because he sees, I don't know if you want to say humanity or whatever within her, is when he starts to break down that conditioning that he was raised to believe, and he believed until he met her. Billy?
You know, Marie put something really brilliant in the chat, and she said, you know, it also maps on top of queer phobia. You know, and you can definitely see that. You can really see how that, you know, mimics that. I'm sorry, Billy, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I was going to just throw out there that Matthias has like a lens, a frame, you know, that he's looking through for the world. And I think that he started to set that down a little bit. And then when Nina, you know, turned him in, he immediately picked up that lens again. And it was just really quick for him, because that's that sort of like racist, you know, phobic lens that he's looking through. And so that's like, if I'm thinking about it that way, it's easy for him to make the conclusion that she turned him in. But if he's thinking, you know, she's thinking like a you know, completely rounded human being, he could have thought, well, maybe she did this to save me in some way. You know what I mean? It's the hatred that blocks that conclusion.
Yes. Go ahead, Marie.
I mean, I do want to come to Matthias's defense that I think he maybe has the biggest arc growth in this book. Like, he completely flips his worldview 180 degrees. And I think that shows immense strength of character. And so, yeah, I'm curious, Nick, if there are other things that, you know, you when you were kind of like thinking about him, that came up for you, is like how those flaws and attributes like spoke to each other.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's got a really good development arc, and me personally, I think when Nina turned him in as a slaver, it made it even harder for him to have that type of arc. Mm-hmm. He was on the road for change, and then all of a sudden, his previous conceptions of her all of a sudden became true again, and it took him a long time to work that out, and it put him in a place where he wasn't able to do that. And then we see, and I haven't read the first 3 books either, so I'm pulling directly from Six of Crows on my knowledge here. You know, we see him kind of re-go through all that all over again. We get a couple flashbacks. We see him relive these things over and over again. And I thought it was really interesting that we saw his strong attributes as a military person help change the way he was thinking. And then all of a sudden it became stickier and stickier. Oh, no, Nina's actually like, no, I'm wrong. And this is why I'm wrong. You can't change my mind now.
And I think that makes it for great writing. Mm-hmm. Because what Leigh did there was, instead of him having a moment of complete change, she goes the other way, which builds up tension for every single character because of Matthias's distrusting attitude. Gabe.
So I'm thinking of, like, from a craft perspective of Matthias's arc. I think first, it's brilliant because every single decision he makes is tied to the story and the outcome of the heist. So I think that raises the stakes like amazingly. But also, you can see every single decision he makes, from the flashbacks to the present in the story. Every single decision could go either way, and you would believe it. You would say, "Yep, he could have done this," and I think that's a perfect gray area in a character, and it's so brilliantly done. And I loved the decisions he came to, but I think that that was so well done.
You know what? And I think, this is a wrap for this episode. I want to go over some of the things that we really talked about. We really talked about how we viewed it through a 7-point plot structure, a 3-act structure about what called to us. We really got to talk about the characters we identified with and who we were. And, we really got to take apart the characters of their flaws and also their greatness, which is, from a writing perspective, really important to remember that not one of those characters felt like a monolith, that they were representative of whatever part of the Grishaverse they were from. So before we exit out, Marie, why don't you start and let us know where we can find you on social media and all your good stuff about your book?
Yeah, probably the easiest thing to do is just head to marieparks.com, MarieParks, because I have one of those names that sounds deceptively simple, but it's hard to spell sometimes. And you can find my social there, my email list and everything.
Amazing. And Gabe?
So I'm basically on Twitter and Instagram under the name Gabriel F. Salmeron. I hope it's going to be in the show notes.
Yes, it'll be in the show notes.
It will be. No worries.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Billy, do you have any social media that you would like to share with the group?
Yeah, you can find me at billyalanpalmer.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at BAPalmer_writes.
BAP. Love it. And all of our social media links will be at the end. And donate to our Patreon, everyone. And that's a wrap.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.